Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll let everyone have a minute to get on to the webinar, but thank you for joining us. Just stay tight for one more minute. Thanks everyone for joining us. We're just giving everyone 1 minute before we get started to get on to the webinar. Thanks so much. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a full agenda for today, so thank you for joining us on this beautiful October day. As always, you have the option of calling in to today's webinar if for any reason you have difficulties with your wireless connection. There's the number, the ID, and password. If you'd like to ask a question during today's webinar, please enter that into the Q&A function on Zoom. Caitlin is watching out for those questions and she'll direct them to speakers when appropriate after they're speaking. And then if any media are joining us today, we ask that you refrain from quoting anyone on today's meeting and encourage you to follow up with participants after the meeting for any direct quotes. So today, like I said, we have a full agenda. We're joined by Caitlin Van Sant with Representative Butterfield's office to give us an update on the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act. Melissa Getz is here with us today with Living with FCS to talk about the HEART Act. Jacqueline Hannigan with Californians for Cures is here to talk about Proposition 14. Ellen Miller with Smashing Walnuts is here to talk about the Gabriella Miller Kids First Research Act 2.0. And Every Life Foundation's Swapna Kakani is going to talk about the importance of state advocacy, voting in state elections, and resources. And then I will quickly let you all know a little bit about RDLA events in 2021. So Caitlin, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm here to talk about the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act, which is an extension of the Rare Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program at FDA. So it's a mouthful. The Rare Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program, or the PRV program, was created in 2012 to solve a market failure, really. As you guys know, there's over 7,000 rare diseases, 50% of which impact kids. But few companies are willing to invest in treatments and potential cures for these conditions because the patient population is so small. The PRV was created to incentivize companies to start searching for treatments and cures for these kids. So it works like this. If the FDA designates a drug as one intended to treat a rare pediatric disease, then upon approval, the FDA will give the drug sponsor a priority review voucher, which entitles, it's kind of like a coupon, it entitles the redeemer to a 6-month priority review of any product at once. Instead of the standard 10-month review, they can either keep the voucher for themselves or sell it to raise money for future drug development. We know that the product or the program's working. Of 35 PRVs awarded by FDA, 22 have been for rare pediatric diseases, including 2 for pediatric cancer. And companies have, they're now prioritizing these conditions and spending money and resources into research and development. My boss introduced the Creating Hope Reauthorization Act last September with his fellow co-chairs of the Congressional Childhood Cancer Caucus. He's also the co-chair of the Congressional Rare Disease Caucus. The program was set to expire on September 30th, but a short-term patch was passed in the most recent continuing resolution, which funds the government. So the program's extended through December 11th, which gives us a little bit more time to get a long-term reauthorization across the finish line. A 4-year extension of the PRV passed the House by voice vote, which was amazing, on September 29th, but the Senate still needs to take action. Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania and Senator Susan Collins from Maine introduced the Senate version of the bill. It's my understanding that Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer are very aware that this needs to be addressed by December 11th, and they're just trying to figure out the appropriate vehicle. Unfortunately, the election has slowed down a lot of things, if not most things, on the Hill, so I don't expect this to happen before then, but you can help by contacting your senators and telling them how important the program is for your community. Some people might not know about the program, so continued education about what it is and how critical it is to finding and developing cures is necessary. The good thing is, which is awesome, is that most of the people who need to know about the PRV, meaning the key senators who make decisions on whether something moves forward or not, are already aware of the bill and are working on it. Just a matter of finding the right path forward. And we probably, like I said, probably won't know that until after the election. But on behalf of my boss, I just want to thank you all for your continued advocacy. It really does work. I can't tell you how many different offices and staffers have contacted me after meeting with you guys to add their boss to either the Rare Disease Caucus or to co-sponsor this bill. So it really does make a difference. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. And thank you to you and your boss for being persistent with this, because I know it's not an easy year to be passing legislation. So we appreciate your persistence and flexibility and determination on this. Someone did ask, could you say what the bill number is? I can't remember it off at the top of my own
Sure,
head.
it's HR 4439.
And the program is the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program at FDA. Perfect. I don't think we have any other questions.
Well, great.
So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on to Melissa on the HEART Act.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Getz. I am the co-president and the co-founder of the FCS Foundation, which stands for Familial Chylomicronemia Syndrome. Perfect, thank you. So just a little bit of background of who we are and how we started and how it plays into all of this. My daughter has FCS. She is 7 years old now. She was diagnosed when she was about 7 weeks old. The disease it results in really high triglycerides and the body's inability to metabolize fat and results in pancreatitis. So when she was diagnosed, about 2 years into her diagnosis, I met Lindsay, who's an adult patient living with FCS. And when we met, we decided to start the foundation. Nothing else existed at the time. There's no treatment for this disease. And there was a need, we realized, in our community. So when we started the foundation in 2016, we were already in the middle of what we realized was a clinical trial that we had patients already enrolled in. So as we were starting the foundation, we were also in the middle of figuring out this clinical trial stuff with the FDA. So we really hit the ground running to share our story and the impact of FCS on our patients. So basically, our interactions with the FDA included a patient-led meeting in February of 2017, a Voice of the Patient report. We participated in the advisory board hearing meeting when the drug was under review, and an additional in-person meeting post-CRL, which I'll get to, and then a teleconference. Next slide. So some things we learned in that process. In 2017, when we had that initial meeting, we had patients and caregivers share their story with the FDA, and we felt it was really positive. We felt like we really got to say a lot, and we were grateful for that. from May to August 2018, the clinical trial came to a close, and we participated in the advisory committee hearing, where again, patients who had been on clinical trial shared the impact of the drug in their lives and the positive ways that it impacted them. We had patients who weren't on the trial share what their experiences with the disease were like and why they were hoping to have access to the drug. And we had physicians who spoke as well. So the advisory committee hearing voted in favor of approving the drug, and we were really excited about that. And then in August of 2018, the FDA issued a complete response letter. So the drug was neither approved nor denied. They wanted more data and more information, potentially another study, and we were really frustrated and pretty heartbroken about that. So a lot of things came up in that advisory committee hearing that we wish we could have addressed had we known and had we had the opportunity. So things like what patients consider to be a burden in terms of monitoring, being on a new drug, how serious and debilitating pancreatitis really is, with the condition related to FCS, why patient dropout rates were so high in terms of sample size percentage. I think the sample size for the study was maybe 65 people, which can be considered pretty high for a rare disease group. But when you have people who drop out, then that impacts the study greatly. So what felt like a really open two-way dialogue early on was no longer accessible to us. And we felt like we lost that conversation and the ability to share our story when it was most important to share it. And what we realized was really no survey or data collection is going to preemptively answer every question that may come up in a clinical trial. Next slide. So post-CRL, our community, again, we were heartbroken and angry about the outcome. We have no other treatment options available, and so we were really excited about this. So post the 2018 CRL, we really started simply. I emailed my congressperson locally through their website, and I just shared my experience and my frustration, and they called me back, and we had a great conversation. And from there, we met with Haystack Project and began setting up meetings with members on the Hill about our experience and what we felt was not an issue just for FCS patients and for our specific disease group, but an overarching rare disease issue for a lot of groups. So we requested a few different meetings with the FDA post-CRL. In December of 2018, we were invited to one meeting along with the sponsoring company where we were able to share a little bit about how we felt about the CRL. And then in February 2019, we requested a follow-up meeting, which was initially declined, and then they agreed to a teleconference with us where we had different patients share their story. Again, patients who had been on drug and patients who had not been, just to share new stories about how impactful the drug had been for them. Next slide. So through all this came the HEART Act. And this was not initially what we set out to do, but as we got the ball rolling, we realized that this was necessary and that we had to follow through with it. When speaking with Hill offices, they said we weren't the first group to share these concerns and issues, and they invited us to create this bill to support all rare disease drug approval process. And as we began talking with other rare disease groups, through opportunities like the Haystack Project, we realized there was a lot of agreement and shared experiences, that these were not unique to FCS, that a lot of other rare disease groups had experienced this in the drug approval process, and they were also equally frustrated about how much dialogue and how much involvement patient groups had in advocating for their communities. So the HEART Act was introduced to Congress in July of 2020 to help all rare disease groups find their voice in the regulatory process. Next slide. So a little bit about what the HEART Act is. While we're grateful for the work the FDA does, and we hope this is the beginning of a long working relationship with them, where hopefully in the future our patients have many potential treatments, we do think that advisory committee hearings should include rare disease experts and small sample experts to review data, and that should just be included in all those hearings. We'd like to include patient input when assessing risk evaluation and mitigation strategies. We'd like to include patient input throughout the entire process of drug evaluation. So typically right now, it's sort of early on in the process, they'll take patient input and the voice of the patient, and they'll hear about patient experiences, and then we're kind of cut off from the rest of it, and we don't get an opportunity to follow up with them or share patient experiences and how we feel during the clinical trial, or answer concerns that they have. We'd like the FDA to be accountable to Congress by providing a report on how many rare disease drug applications they see per year by division. So the division that reviews our drugs, it's the appropriate division, it's where they should be, but they don't see a lot of rare disease applications each year. And, you know, a rare disease, it's going to be different than seeing a drug application for a big disease with big sample sizes that's well known and that the outcomes are easy to measure. So we just want to know what they're seeing, how many they're seeing each year, and then we can identify where they might need more support and offer that support to those divisions. And the final is to require a GAO study looking at procedures done in the European Union and how that data can assist the drug approval process in the US. And part of that came about because in our situation, and in talking with other rare disease groups, we realized that drugs are being approved in Europe, and our counterparts, you know, in other parts of the world have access to treatment, but us living in the US, we don't. And this drug was approved in Europe. So we know that people are using it and having positive results with it and having a change in quality of life because they have access to it. And it's frustrating and difficult for us here in the United States to know that we don't have access. So at the bottom there, that link, haystackproject.org/actnow, you can log on there and fill out a form to share your support for the HEART Act. A Dear Colleague letter did go out on September 16th from the two sponsoring congressmen. So, you know, we're really hopeful. We're really excited about it. It's HR 7567. And we would love, you know, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to talk more about it or ways for you to get involved to help support the act. But, you know, just reaching out to your congressperson would be great. I don't know if there are any questions.
Great, thank you, Melissa. There's a question about the HR number, but I don't see any other questions. We can give it a second to make sure. But I appreciate you. I know that you guys have been working on this for a while, and you presented a few months back for the RDLA webinar too. So it's exciting to
introduced. So now it's been introduced. We have the Dear Colleague letter that went out. We have ways to, so we're really excited.
There's one question about how many people are living with FCS in the United States. Do you know?
We say it's 1 in a million. We think it might be 2 per million, maybe a little bit higher. We think it's really underdiagnosed as well. So, you know, it's considered one of those, I guess, ultra rare conditions, but we're finding people slowly.
Great. Well, I'm gonna, it doesn't look like there are any other questions in the Q&A. So we will, thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna turn it over now to Jacqueline.
Thank you. Good morning, or good afternoon, as the case might be. Thank you to Shannon Von Velden and Caitlin Law and the entire RDL community for inviting me to speak today on behalf of Prop 14, the Californians for Stem Cell Research, Treatments, and Cures Initiative. Thank you to Siri Bath for connecting me to the RDL community. I am honored to be with you today. And since yesterday was Stem Cell Awareness Day, in the spirit of continued celebration, let me say Happy Stem Cell Awareness Day. I think we're on the, yeah, you can just stay there with the slide. This initiative renews funding for the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, otherwise known as CIRM. I'll say more about CIRM in a moment, but first I want to share my own story and why this initiative means so much to me personally. In 2001, my father, Henry, sustained a spinal cord injury due to a fall. His injury changed his life and the lives of all of the members of our family. A few years later, desperate to help my father and others suffering, I learned about Prop 71. the initiative that would create the California State Stem Cell Agency, which would provide $3 billion to fund vital stem cell research. Next slide, please. Over 90 advocacy organizations, dozens of Nobel laureates, elected officials, community leaders, medical organizations, and many others endorsed Prop 71. The initiative passed overwhelmingly with 59% of California voters in favor and led to the creation of CIRM, which has yielded positive results beyond our expectations. Let me just share some of what CIRM has accomplished over the past 14 years with you. Next slide, please. Thank you. 64 clinical trials funded directly by CIRM and more than 30 others for which the earlier stage research was funded by CIRM, with an overall total of 4,000 patients enrolled or expected to be enrolled. Almost 3,000 peer-reviewed medical discoveries published, and 3 clinical trials in progress for sickle cell disease. And these are very important, and I want to share a few words about each of them. One trial genetically modifies the patient's own HSCs or hemotopic stem cells to produce a correct version of the hemoglobin. The genetically modified stem cells are then given back to the patient to create a new sickle cell-free blood supply. The second trial uses umbilical cord stem cells from healthy donors, which will help solve the issue of matching and availability in order to generate enough stem cells for transplantation. A small molecule is used to expand these blood stem cells. The product cells are then transplanted in children and young adults with sickle cell disease. The third trial involves transplanting blood-forming stem cells from a donor into a patient who has received a milder, less toxic chemotherapy treatment that removes some but not all of the patient's diseased bone marrow stem cells. This allows the donor stem cells to engraft and create a healthy supply of non-diseased blood cells without causing an immune reaction in the patient. There is so much more to say about these trials and others, but in the interest of time, allow me to invite you to visit the CIRM website at cirm.ca.gov to learn more. Next slide, please. Given the inspiring and important work you are dedicated to, allow me to speak a bit more about CIRM's impact on rare diseases and what Prop 14 will make possible going forward. Let me tell you about Brendan Whitaker. You might have read about him in the news just last week. Brendan was born with a rare genetic disorder called X-linked chronic granulomatous disease, or XCGD, which is a type of primary immunodeficiency. This basically means that his immune system did not function properly, and if exposed to bacteria or viruses, you could die. His prognosis was not good, but fortunately, he was informed of a CIRM-funded clinical trial conducted by Dr. Cohn to treat his condition. Brandon became the first participant in this trial, which involved taking his blood stem cells, using gene therapy to correct the XCGD mutation, and reintroducing these modified cells back into his body. Following the procedure, blood tests confirmed that the treatment produced enough blood-corrected cells for Brendan to now be protected from severe infection. Today, Brendan is working as a patient care associate at a hospital in Ohio. He is one of 5 patients who have received the same treatment for XCGD. Many more lives will be touched by these discoveries in the future. The same gene therapy approach for blood stem cells was used in another CIRM-funded trial for a different form of immune deficiency called ADA-SCID. The research here has resulted in 50 babies being cured of the condition, including little Evie, pictured here. I have the privilege of speaking to Evie's mother, Alicia, yesterday, and she asked me to share with you her incredible feeling of gratitude and wonder at seeing her daughter's recovery. She used to worry every time Evie got sick that she would never get well. But because of this transformational therapy, she has been given hope and the comfort of believing that when Evie has a cold, just like all sorts of other children, she will be able to experience a full recovery without the worry of a hospital visit. CIRM's work on SCID and other rare diseases quite literally has changed the lives of patients and their families in ways that were just unimaginable 15 years ago. In addition to sickle cell disease and SCID, CIRM has funded research in making a difference with other rare diseases, including cystinosis, a rare kidney disease, Huntington's disease, a devastating neurological disease, Canavan, Tay-Sachs, Sandoff, all of which are rare neurodegenerative diseases affecting the brain, and Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which results in degenerative muscular atrophy and sadly, eventually death. Here's why it's critically important here's what is critically important to consider. If Prop 14 is not passed, funding for this work will simply disappear. Much of the life-saving research that is currently being done will come to a halt. California ranks second in the world in biomedical research as a nation, behind only the United States as a whole. 50% of the stem cell research work done in California is funded by CIRM, the California state agency. Imagine what would happen for the rare disease research I mentioned earlier if half of stem cell funding just went away. California's voting yes on Prop 14 will help to ensure the authorization of $5.5 billion in funding to continue CIRM's life-saving work. And for those of you joining us from across the country, please know that this impacts all of us. While CIRM funding exclusively stays in California, the cures, the therapies, the treatments created impact people all over the world in achieving our ultimate goal of mitigating human suffering and chronic diseases. I think we need to go to the next slide, please. Here are some important details on the measure. Prop 14 is a bond measure. It's a general obligation bond with no payments to the state for 5 years after it's passed. Prop 14 will stimulate job development and pump much needed funds into the California economy right now when we need it most given our economic downturn. And again, it won't cost the state anything for the first 5 years. Prop 14 additionally will provide high school students with limited access to resources, summer internships through the SPARK program. To date, nearly 450 students have been given this learning and development opportunity, which specifically selects students from undeserved communities. Prop 14 will continue much needed training programs for students from community colleges and the Cal State University systems through Bridges program. These students are the future leaders and researchers of the fields of stem cell science and medicine, and also help further develop the backbone of biotech industry needed to ultimately develop therapies to patients. Thus far, CIRM has funded training for nearly 1,300 students across California in this program. Prop 14 will improve diversity, patient access, and affordability by helping to ensure that Californians of all racial and ethnic backgrounds and income levels can afford and have greater access to life-saving treatments and therapies. Prop 14 has been endorsed by more than 200 patient advocacy and other organizations, more than 100 Nobel laureates, scientists, and physicians. Over 50 national, state, and community leaders, including Governor Newsom, Lieutenant Governor Eleni Koulakis, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Secretary of State Alex Padilla, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, the LA Mayor Eric Garcetti, and so many other, including over 300 patients and community advocates. Next slide, please. So what can you do to help that this research funds stay in place? For your California friends and family, please ask them to vote yes on 14. This proposition is working on a grassroots level, and we are relying on people like you telling others about it. Please visit caforcures.com or yeson14.com, Both will lead you to the same website to learn more about the initiative, and there you can find the full list of endorsements, coalition members, disease fact sheets, and so many other success stories as well. Join the coalition. You don't have to be in California to do so. Visit CIRM's website. You can participate in upcoming symposiums and events and learn more about the scope of the medical breakthroughs and discoveries of literally dozens of diseases. Follow us on social media channels that are listed in the slide. And once again, if you're a California resident, please vote on November 3rd or before in favor of Prop 14. I have included my email as well if you'd like to reach me at a later date for further questions or a conversation. I obviously come to this as a patient advocate with great enthusiasm and passion to mitigating suffering and diseases for all. And with that, with much appreciation and respect, thank you to the RDLA for the opportunity to be with you today on behalf of Prop 14. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Caitlin, are there any questions in the Q&A for Jacqueline?
Yes, Jacqueline, there is one question for you in the Q&A. The question is, who currently funds this? Is it state funded in California?
Right. Okay. So the history that led up to Prop 14 was Prop 71. In 2004, there was a previous ballot initiative, which was Prop 71, which we allocated, I think it was in the first slide, $3 billion to establish the state agency. So this is a California state agency that generates money from the sale of state bonds to fuel and maintain the agency. And why we're on the ballot today is because we need to renew the funding for this California state agency known as CIRM, so that it continues to carry on these life-saving measures of research, discovery, clinical trials, translational medicine, and so forth. So again, it's a California state agency. There are some dynamics in terms of matching grants and things like that, but it's mostly it's to be understood as a California state agency. And it's a bond, and there's no repayments back to the state for the first 5 years. So there's no economic interest in terms of diversion of state funds. There it is clearly stated and very well articulated in terms of the structure. And we create jobs in so doing and maintain the jobs that already exist. And of course, most importantly, carry on the life-saving critical research opportunities and the enormous successes. Two FDA-approved cancer drugs have been approved, and there's nearly 900 patents that are in place because of the success of Prop 71 since the passage of in 2004.
Great, that makes sense. Anything else, Caitlin?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to get my mic unmuted. Someone asked, why is this not expanded to other states? Why only in California?
Yeah, that's a really good question. California is the 6th leading economy in the world, and we wish it, I mean, it would be great if it happened in other states. And Californians and the author of the initiative, the heroic and amazing Bob Klein, who did it, who wrote the initiative and is the chair of the proposition, has also a very personal story. And in early to the 2000s, with the suffering of his son from diabetes and his mother from Alzheimer's, he and some others at the time got together and literally wrote the initiative, wrote the legislation that got passed, that we put on the ballot tirelessly with a signature gathering campaign. It is the procedure and how it works in terms of propositions in the state of California, and took matters sort of into their own hands when funding for this very vital research, stem cell research, was restricted. So it's not to say it can't happen in other states, but California took the lead and continues to be in so doing with its success and the second Initiative Prop 14. I hope that succinctly answers that question.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, answering the questions, and for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my honor and privilege. And thank you to everyone. And I've learned a great deal from the other speakers as well. So thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ellen Miller now.
Hello, thank you very much to the RDLA for putting all of us together. I'm going to actually start with what I should close with. And just, excuse me, in hearing all the other speakers, what we all are talking about is the need for knowledge to be spread throughout our communities, but also help with our elected officials. And if there's just one thing that all of us on the panel and all of us that are listening in on is, please do take the quick minute to sign on to whatever it is that we need to for our elected officials to support one another in our legislation, because we need to be able to do that in order to get to the cures that we need for our children and adults. So my name is Ellen Miller. My daughter, Gabriella, was 9 years old when she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer called DIPG, diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. This is the same brain cancer that killed, excuse me, that killed Neil Armstrong's daughter back in 1962, almost 60 years ago. It's the exact same treatment. But yet in that time, we have gotten a man to the moon. We've actually orbited the Earth with a car, but we can't cure something that's a few inches under our skin. You could see the picture. It's an image that's supposed to be my daughter and a frying pan. Gabriella's tumor was the size of a walnut, so we literally started smashing walnuts, signifying smashing her tumor. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about the original legislation before going on to the first one. I would like everybody to know the success of our first bill that we had. This slide actually is pieces that I took out of an email that I just received from Dr. Collins, the director of NIH, thanking me for the advocacy that I do and that my working group does to help ensure that the original Gabriella Miller Kids First Research Act is funded annually. The original bill proposed to move $126 million over to NIH, to the Common Fund for Childhood Cancer and Disease Research over the course of 10 years. So to date, we've gotten 6 consecutive years funded. We are in the FY 2021 budget for another $12.6 million this year. The challenge is that we've just got a few short years before it sunsets. So from the original bill, and again, these are excerpts from the letter that Dr. Collins sent to me. There's been substantial progress towards identifying genetic pathways that underlie childhood cancer and structural birth defects. Whole genome sequencing of 40 different childhood cancers and structural birth defects have been done since its inception. And the results are over 18 scientific journal publications with dozen more about to be released in the coming year. They've uncovered genetic causes of neuroblastoma. And this research that has been done will lead towards earlier recognition and detection and potentially developing new preventions. Next slide, please. To date, over 52 research institutes across the country have received grants. What I will also say is I encourage everybody, please, it doesn't matter the disease, everybody please to go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and the search bar type in either Gabriella Miller or Kids First, and you can sign up for their newsletter. I encourage everybody to do this because from that site, whenever they are accepting grants, it will come out from there first. So I have shared that with, I can't even tell you, countless amount of folks who have then gone on, seen the grants that are out there and have been able to take advantage of applying for a grant. And as we all know, you could go onto any site, any government site, looking for any new grants where we could apply for. But if you sign off, 5 minutes later, a new grant could come on and you can miss this. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll not only know about all of the amazing work that they do, you'll be the first to know about new grants that come to play. Next slide, please. One of the most important and exciting things that I'm the most proud of is the Data Resource Center that was a grant was received through this. And so something that that I love about this so much is when my daughter died, my husband and I made the decision to donate her tumor. I have met the doctor that has her tumor. And one day he came to me and said, Ellen, through CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and in conjunction with about 6 other hospitals working together collaboratively, we want to put together a data resource center, and we're applying for a grant through the Kids First. Will you please write us a letter of recommendation? And so, of course, I said yes. This was to the doctor that has my daughter's tumor. They're applying for a grant through the funding that has her name on it. And this research portal is now out there. Please, please, again, go onto this portal and see the work that is being done there. Not only to see the work that's being done, but for those of us that have researchers that are looking for information, that cohorts that you need. You could go to this site. It is available not only to researchers and physicians, but to the public as well. There have been over 2,200 users from 46 states and 50 different countries. And what's really exciting about this is if you're looking at a specific mutated gene and you type that information in, it will populate with things. It may not even be your disease, but you might find out about drugs that they're using and the effects that they have had. And you can then use that information to further your studies. What they ask in return is whatever you get from your studies that you then put it back into the Kids First to make it a very robust system that we have. Next slide, please. So those are things that have been accomplished from the original Kids First. Like I said, it sunsets in just a few short years. I went to my current congresswoman and said, we need more funding. Their childhood cancer and childhood rare disease will not go away in the next couple of years, and we need help with that. So I love our new funding source that we have. It is very exciting. It is does not require our elected officials to appropriate the funds in any way. It does not cost our taxpayers one single penny because it comes from an existing penalty against pharmaceuticals and cosmetic companies and natural supplement companies that break the law. So this is through the Foreign Corrupt Policy Act. And the monies that come out of this are extensive. From 2013 through 2019, there were 6 penalties against pharmaceuticals for almost $600 million. Currently, those funds are just going into the common fund. They are not dedicated to any source. When this bill passes and is signed into law, it will then be dedicated to the Kids First, and it has no sunset date. So it will continuously fund childhood cancer and disease research. Next slide, please. You can help. I will share with you that this all came to be because my daughter, Gabriella, 2 weeks before she died, was interviewed for a childhood cancer awareness organization back in 2013. It was at the time of sequestration. Government couldn't balance the budget and everything shut down. There were children that were going to NIH for life-saving treatments that were being turned away. my daughter needed the FDA to take a look at the chemotherapies that she was taking, and they were shut down. So we were scrambling to find a new drug to keep her alive. And the interviewer asked Gabriella, if you could say anything to our elected officials, what would you say? And Gabriella, who was 10 years old at the time and had her brain riddled with cancer, said, stop talking, start doing. And then she said, I don't care, I'm just gonna say it. Talk is bullshit, we need actions. And she burst into laughter. And you could hear the interviewer and myself off camera laughing that this little 10-year-old girl had the audacity to say a bad word and call our elected officials out. But she did. And that, a week after that interview, Gabriella came home on hospice. The interviewer put out about a dozen little snippets of that interview, and that one where Gabriella said, stop talking, start doing, caught the attention of former House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. 2 weeks after Gabriella died, 1 month after that interview, we were in Eric Cantor's office, and he told us about this bill, HR 2019, that was languishing in the House. He asked us if we would attach Gabriella's name to it. From the moment her name was attached to this bill until it was signed into law by President Obama was just 4 months. And all of us who are working up on the Hill know that things just don't work that quickly. And then from the moment it was signed into law until it was first appropriated was another 8 months. So this little girl who was dying called out our elected officials and said, we need help. And from that point, we now have, like I said, over $75 million that is going to work. And now this new bill, HR 6556, which will perpetually fund childhood cancer and disease research. Next slide, please. So you could help in several different ways. One is to sign on to our letter of support. We have a letter of support that currently has over 1,100 advocates from across the country that have signed on. And we have over 250 organizations, groups, and foundations, again, across the country have signed on to support this. This letter goes to our elected officials. It is in our one-pager that we send to them, letting them know that the advocates are standing behind this and they want their help for this. Next slide, please. And finally, another way that you can help us is to join our Zoom meetings. I regularly have Zoom calls with our elected officials. As a matter of fact, today I have 3 after this call is over. And we encourage and really like to have constituents call in and join them. It is so much more powerful when people tell their own story. So our calls last about 30 minutes. I start out briefly talking about the bill and asking for the elected officials' support by way of co-sponsorship. And then I turn it over to the constituents that are on the call. And so we would love to have you join us. And if you would like to, please send an email saying that you'd like to sign on to that, that email that you see right there. And with that, I am open for any questions, and I thank you, RDLA, for allowing me to share this.
Thank you, Ellen. Caitlin, do we have any questions for Ellen today?
We do not have any in the Q&A box at the moment.
Great. All right. Well, if anyone does have questions, you can email me or Caitlin, and we can make sure to put you in contact with Ellen. Thank you so much, Ellen. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Let's see, and now we're going to pass it over to Swapna.
Thank you, Shannon and Caitlin, for having me on. I'm excited to speak on a webinar for the first time and also introduce myself to the community. My name is Swapna Kakani. I am the RDLA State Advocacy Fellow. My responsibility is to grow the RDLA state advocacy efforts and build more resources and the program for state advocacy, which we'll talk about. Because I will be talking about voting and elections this November, I want to state this nonpartisan disclaimer and remind everyone that the Every Life Foundation and RDLA are nonpartisan organizations and programs. This presentation is solely to inform and provide an opportunity to learn, understand, and find resources on voting in both the local and state elections. This presentation does not serve as an endorsement for any legislation, candidate, or political party discussed. Next slide, please. So why is state legislative advocacy important? Individuals on the call who have rare diseases and their respective caregivers and family members may already understand that where you live really can dictate the healthcare delivery of rare disease, your specific rare disease. Because the state in which you live can dictate the type and quality of care you receive and the resources you have available to you to access. Many bills and regulations are controlled at the state level that impact the rare disease community. For example, one that we speak about frequently at the Every Life Foundation is newborn screening. Newborn screening has a balance between both federal policy as well as state policy. By interacting with state legislators, as well as state decision makers, we increase awareness of rare disease issues. For example, the coverage of diagnostics, coverage of treatments, access to treatments, access to care, coordination of care with our providers, both in the state as well as subspecialty providers in and outside of the state, as well as insurance coverage to our state legislators and other community stakeholders in the area in which we live. By taking state community action and interacting with state legislators and doing advocacy, we have the potential as a rare disease community to improve healthcare delivery for the rare disease community and the local area in which we live. So how do we go about this? 3 ways the community is already going about this and taking action in state legislative advocacy is state organizations, rare disease state legislative caucuses, as well as rare disease advisory councils. Next slide, please. So with the resources we are producing as we speak, we will be sharing more information on those 3 topics, as well as much more. We're excited to have already published 2 tip sheets that are available to you on our website on a state-based organization, as well as the difference between rare disease caucuses and advisory councils. So briefly, an state-based organization, we have several advocates in the community that have gotten together in their area, in their state, to unite the rare disease community of stakeholders and create an organization to increase awareness for rare disease issues in their state, as well as to advocate for state policy. And Caitlin has provided the link to these tip sheets in the chat. Thank you, Caitlin. So the tip sheet talks about how to start the organization as well, and then the other tip sheet, it discusses the difference on caucuses and councils. Next slide, please. So I'm going to shift gears really quickly and talk about voting in the election. And as you may be aware, and very aware, excuse me, that this is a presidential election, and there's a lot of media about who we're electing for president and vice president. But I want to remind you that this election, we're also voting for senators, House members, governors at the state level, Secretary of State, Supreme Court, as well as many state legislators. We cannot harp enough that every election at every level truly matters. Next slide. So why are state legislative races important? There are 5,876 state legislative races going on this November in 44 of our 50 states. The policies at the state level, passed or failed, impact our day-to-day lives. And a lot more policies go through the legislature at the state level than at the federal level, or get to the finish line, I should say. State races, just like at the federal level, determine which party has control of the state Senate or the state House. What's something unique about 2021 next year is that 2021 starts redistricting based on the 2020 census data. Redistricting means redrawing district lines. And the state legislature is responsible for that, and the party who has control, or the party who has a majority, is responsible for controlling the process. Many state legislative sessions start in the spring between January and March, and now is the time to engage with state legislators to talk about policy, to talk about your story and issues you have living with a rare disease in your state, and what we can do as partners with the state legislator and yourself as an advocate to make change. We encourage you now to take action and contact your legislator. At rareadvocates.org/take action, the link that on the slide, you can both look up your legislator as well as look up the candidates running for election at every level by putting in your zip code and address. Next slide, please. So another link that we've created is to stay informed for this election. One of the links on this page, all of the resources are great. Caitlin did a great job putting this together. One of the links I'm going to highlight on this presentation is Ballot Initiatives. Next slide, please. When you click on Ballot Initiatives, it will take you to the National Council of State Legislature, and there will be a search function where you can search for all the ballot measures in your state or all the ballot measures across the country. I have just put a random sample of ballot measures that are being voted on in this November. Jacqueline did a great job describing Prop 14 in California, but you can see that the other states that I've selected here, these are important issues. A ballot measure is a law, an issue, or even a question that the voters can decide on. Some are term limit amendment. One is recognition of marriage regardless of gender. Another one is family and medical leave insurance, which is giving funds for families to provide the family with medical leave insurance. So these are important topics that you please do look up if these are on your ballot. Next slide, please. So finally, please keep in touch. I'm very excited to have this role at RDLA as the State Advocacy Fellow. Please feel free to email me at this email, skakani@everylifefoundation.org. Be happy to talk to you in more detail about state legislative advocacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Swapna. We have 3 minutes to go. Thank you, everyone, for holding in there. I think we're going to finish right on time at 1 o'clock. So thank you, Swapna, for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact Swapna, or if you want to get more involved in the work that she's doing. We're really excited to have her joining us at Every Life and with RDLA. I'm going to quickly I have one little slide that I wanted to share, and many of you probably received an email with the announcement last month, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that in 2021 we are flip-flopping our events. So normally our Rare Across America is our August in-district program, and Rare Disease Week usually takes place in February to coincide with Rare Disease Day. But this year we are trying to optimize our chances of having Rare Disease Week as an in-person event here in Washington, D.C. So we have decided to move that event to July 20th to 22nd. I guess technically that's July 19th to 22nd. A little typo there. And we are planning to do our full week of events that we normally would do in February. And since I know everyone is going to be biting at the bit with the new Congress and still wanting to be active and involved in February, we have decided to do Rare Across America from February 22nd to March 5th. It'll be virtual meetings with members of Congress and Hill staffers. It'll be a great opportunity to meet with those of you who will have new representatives and senators, and also just to get our stories and our priorities out there in the beginning of a new Congress. And we're planning some other events during this 2-week period too, including a caucus briefing and some other events that we will be holding virtually as well. So you might want to take note for your calendars and planning your vacations and work and everything else. I know that everyone is really busy doing right now and next year. But if you have any questions about this, you can feel free to reach out to me and email me, and we're happy to share any information that we do have for you. And then just a quick save the date for next month. We will hold our webinar on November 19th. That's the week before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is late this year. So as always, if there's a particular topic or speaker that you would like to learn more from, or if you yourself are working like the great advocates that we had on today, great examples of the great work that rare disease advocates are doing all across the country, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself. We build up our webinar agenda, you know, the month leading up to the month before the webinar. So usually we can squeeze people in to our webinars. So please feel free to reach out to us. And then of course, we just want to thank our webinar sponsors for today who helped make this possible. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. I think we did it just about on time, 101. So thank you everyone for joining us, and to our speakers. It was amazing to hear from all of you and the wonderful work you guys are all doing. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.